Most Americans are going to retire broke. I know that sounds harsh. I know it sounds like one of those things people say just to get your attention, but I need you to really sit with that for a second, because this isn't a statistic I'm throwing at you to scare you. This is what the data actually shows. According to the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, 54% of Americans report having no dedicated retirement savings whatsoever. And the amount that Americans now believe they need to retire comfortably in 2026 has climbed to $1.46 million. Let that contrast land for a second. More than half of the country has nothing saved, and the target number keeps going up. And here's the part that nobody talks about. A lot of those people have a 401k. They're not people who never tried. They're people who tried wrong. They put money in, they left the default settings on, they trusted the system to do the work, and the system quietly took a chunk of their money in fees every single year for decades, compounding those losses just as efficiently as the market compounds gains. So what I want to do today, and I'm going to promise you this in the first 20 seconds, because I think you deserve to know what you're signing up for before you give me the next 30 minutes of your life. What I want to do is show you exactly how to use your 401k the right way so you can retire faster, retire with more, and stop leaving free money on the table every single year. And I mean that. By the time this video is done, you are going to understand this better than most people who call themselves financial professionals. Let me tell you about a man I'll call Robert. Robert is 62 years old. He worked as an operations manager for the same company for 31 years. Not a glamorous job, but honest, stable work. He made decent money, somewhere around $75,000 a year toward the end of his career. And his company offered a 401k with a match, a genuinely good match, actually. His employer would match 100% of his contributions up to 4% of his salary. And Robert, because nobody ever sat him down and explained what that meant, contributed exactly 3% every year. Not 4, 3. For 31 years, he left 1% of his salary, free money, money his employer would have handed him for doing nothing different, sitting uncollected. Over 31 years, with compounding, that uncollected free money grew into somewhere close to $180,000 that Robert never had. That's not the saddest part. The saddest part is that Robert is completely normal. He is not the exception. He is the rule. And I think about stories like Robert's because they bother me. I'm not someone who sits here and feels superior about this stuff. I just genuinely cannot stand watching people lose money that was never hard to keep, especially when the only thing standing between them and a better retirement was the right information at the right time. That's it. Information. Not some genius strategy, not some secret only rich people know. Just a clear explanation of how this thing actually works, delivered in plain English by someone who isn't trying to sell you anything. My name is John, and that's what today is about. No fluff, no generic advice, no talking down to you like you don't understand money. Just the truth, laid out step by step, about how to use your 401k the way it was designed to be used, so your money works as hard as you do. Maybe harder. The first question I want to address is the one that honestly shouldn't need much explaining, but somehow still does. When should you start your 401k? And look, I'm going to be honest with you here. If you're already in your 30s, you know the answer. If you're in your 40s, you definitely know the answer. This section is really for the younger crowd, for Gen Z, for people in their early 20s who feel like retirement is so far away that it doesn't even register as a real thing yet. And I get it. When you're 23, thinking about being 65 is like thinking about a different lifetime, a different version of yourself that barely feels related to who you are right now. Retirement is for old people. You've got things to do. You've got student loans, maybe a car payment, rent, and approximately $0 left over at the end of the month. I hear you, but I need you to hear me, and I need you to hear me clearly, because what I'm about to show you is the single most important financial concept you will ever encounter. It's called compounding, and the math is going to make you feel something. Let's say you contribute just $100 a month into your 401k. That's $1,200 a year. Not aggressive, not heroic, just $100 a month. We'll assume a 7% average annual return, which is right in the middle of the historical average for a diversified 401k portfolio. And we'll include a standard employer match so that $100 becomes a little more with the help of your company contributing alongside you. If you start at 35 and contribute $100 a month until you're 65, you'll have roughly $170,000 at retirement. If you start at 30, 5 years earlier, same $100 a month, same 7%, you'll have roughly $248,000. And if you start at 25, just 5 years earlier than that, still the same $100 a month, you'll end up with approximately $359,000. So let's be completely clear about what just happened in those three numbers. Starting at 25 instead of 35, a difference of 10 years, and only 10 years of extra $100 a month contributions gives you nearly $190,000 more at retirement. That's not $190,000 more that you put in. You only put in $12,000 more over those 10 years. The other $178,000 came from your money sitting in the market longer and compounding on itself. It's your money making money, and that money making more money, and that money making even more money for decades. This is why every financial professional in the world, including the ones I disagree with on almost everything else, agrees on this one thing. The single most powerful move you can make for your retirement is to start as early as humanly possible. Not next year, not when you pay off the car, not when you get the promotion. Now, today, even if it's $50 a month, even if it's $25, the amount is almost secondary to the act of starting, because every single month you delay is a month of compounding that you can never get back. And I want to say something to the people who are watching this in their 30s or their 40s and are feeling some kind of regret right now, maybe even a little guilt. I want you to let that go. I mean it. The second best time to start is right now, and the difference between starting today and starting next year is still enormous. You haven't lost the game, but you do need to start playing it seriously. All right, so you understand the when. Now let's talk about the how much, because this is where I see people make some genuinely costly mistakes, and where I also see people leave the most money behind unnecessarily. The minimum answer is simple. You should always, at the very least, contribute enough to capture your full employer match. Always, no exceptions. If your company offers to match your contributions, even partially, and you are not putting in enough to get that full match, you are turning down part of your compensation package. You are working for less than you agreed to work for. I know that's a blunt way to put it, but it's true. Here's how employer matching typically works. Let's say your company offers a 50% match on up to 6% of your salary. If you make $80,000 a year and you contribute 6% of your salary, that's $4,800 a year or $400 a month. Your company adds an additional 50% of that, which is $2,400. That's $2,400 a year in free money that shows up in your retirement account just because you put your own money in first. Some companies are even more generous. Some do a 100% match, meaning every dollar you put in, they match dollar for dollar up to that cap. If your company does that, you need to understand that contributing less than the match cap is essentially a pay cut you're giving yourself. Now, not every company matches. Some small businesses and startups don't offer any match at all, and that's a reality for a lot of people. If that's your situation, the 401k is still worth using because of its tax advantages. We'll get to that. But the urgency of maxing out the match obviously doesn't apply. So what's the right total amount to contribute beyond the match? The general guideline that most sensible financial planners agree on is 10 to 15% of your gross income going toward retirement savings. That includes whatever your employer contributes. So if your employer is putting in 3%, you need to make sure you're contributing at least 7 to 12% on top of that to hit the target range. It sounds like a lot, especially when you're younger and the budget is tight, but the key is to be intentional about it and to increase your contributions over time as your income grows. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Now, the 401k has annual contribution limits set by the IRS, and these just went up again for 2026. The limit for employee contributions is now $24,500 per year if you're under 50. That's up from $23,500 last year. And if you're 50 or older, you get what's called a catch-up contribution allowance, which for 2026 is an additional $8,000 on top of that, bringing your total possible contribution to $32,500. Very few people max this out, and that's okay. But if you're in a season of your life where you have the financial capacity to push toward that ceiling, do it. Every extra dollar going in now is growing tax-deferred for as long as it sits there. And here's something that a lot of people in their early 60s don't know about yet, because it's relatively new. If you're between the ages of 60 and 63, there's a provision called the Super Catch-Up Contribution that lets you put in an additional $11,250 instead of the standard $8,000 catch-up if your plan allows it. That means your total potential contribution for 2026 as a 60 to 63-year-old is $35,750. If you're in that window and you have the ability to push more money in, this is one of the most powerful accelerators available to you right now. Take it seriously. And I want to address one question I know some of you have in the back of your mind right now, which is, John, what if I've already maxed out the employer match and still have money I want to invest for retirement? Where does it go? Great question. You've got a few solid options. You can continue contributing to your 401k above the match, which is perfectly fine. More tax-deferred growth is never a bad thing as long as you can afford it. Or you can look at a Roth IRA, which I personally find to be an excellent complement to a traditional 401k. The Roth IRA gives you more flexibility in what you can invest in. You're not limited to whatever fund options your employer's plan offers, and the tax treatment is different in a meaningful way. With a traditional 401k, you're investing pre-tax dollars, meaning you pay taxes when you withdraw in retirement. With a Roth IRA, you contribute post-tax dollars, but all the growth and all the withdrawals in retirement are completely tax-free. For a lot of people, especially younger workers who are in a lower tax bracket now than they expect to be in retirement, that Roth tax advantage is a genuinely big deal. There are also other tax-advantaged accounts worth knowing about, like the Health Savings Account, or HSA if you have a high-deductible health plan. The HSA is one of the most underrated retirement tools in existence, and I'll tell you why in another video. For today, just know that it's in the toolbox. Okay. This next section is the one where I'm probably going to say some things that will rub a few financial advisors the wrong way. I'm fine with that because I think the conventional advice around how to invest your 401k is genuinely confusing in a way that doesn't need to be, and I think it leads a lot of people to either make bad decisions or do nothing at all. And doing nothing with your 401k investment allocations is one of the most expensive mistakes you can make. When you open your 401k and you look at the list of fund options, it can feel completely overwhelming. You've got large cap growth funds, small cap value funds, emerging market funds, bond funds, stable value funds, target date funds, balanced funds. It goes on. And most people either panic and pick whatever's in the middle, or they leave the default allocation that the plan set for them when they enrolled, which is often a target date fund pegged to your expected retirement year. Target date funds aren't the worst thing in the world, but they're also not optimized. They're designed to be the default, which means they're designed for someone who isn't paying attention. You're paying attention. Now, here's what a lot of financial advisors will tell you. They'll say, your investment allocation within your 401k should be based on your financial objectives, your risk tolerance, and your age. And I want to push back on this because while it sounds sophisticated, in practice, it's the kind of advice that makes people overthink a decision that is fundamentally pretty simple. Let me start with financial objectives. When your money is inside a 401k, the financial objective is self-evident. Grow the money safely over time so you have enough to retire on. That's it. Whether your specific goal is to retire at 55, or travel the world, or pass money to your kids, It all leads to the same underlying requirement. The money needs to grow. The objective doesn't change what you should do, it just changes when you might start accessing it. Risk tolerance is the one that I find most frustrating because I think people apply it incorrectly to retirement money. Risk tolerance is relevant when you're talking about discretionary investing, money you can afford to lose some of if things go sideways. Retirement money is different. This isn't your Robinhood account. This isn't money you're using to buy individual stocks or try your hand at options. This is the money you are depending on to live when you can no longer or no longer want to work. Your risk tolerance for that money should be conservative, regardless of your age, because losing a significant portion of it close to retirement can be catastrophic in a way that you genuinely cannot recover from. That does not mean you put everything in bonds and money market funds and watch inflation eat your purchasing power alive. It means you diversify intelligently and resist the urge to make dramatic moves based on market headlines or what someone told you at a dinner party. Here's the approach that I believe in and that the data backs up pretty consistently. Diversify across asset classes and stick with it. Spread your contributions across domestic stock funds, international stock funds, bond funds, and some exposure to small cap and large cap in your equity allocations. You don't need to have 6 different allocations perfectly calibrated. You need to not have all your eggs in one basket, and you need to choose funds with low expense ratios. The specific percentage split can evolve over time as you get closer to retirement and naturally want to reduce volatility, but the core principle is always the same. Spread it out, keep costs low, and leave it alone. And that brings me to the expense ratio conversation, which I need you to take seriously, because this is where billions of dollars silently disappear from American retirement accounts every single year. Every fund inside your 401k charges a fee to manage the money. That fee is called the expense ratio, and it's expressed as a percentage of your assets. It might look like 0.05% or 0.15% for an index fund, and it might look like 0.75% or even 1.5% or higher for an actively managed fund. That gap between 0.05% and 1.5% doesn't sound dramatic, but over a 30-year retirement savings window, it is genuinely devastating to your final balance. Here's the math, and I want you to really hear this. Let's say you have $100,000 invested and your money grows at 7% a year. If your expense ratio is 0.10%, over 30 years, your account grows to roughly $740,000. If your expense ratio is 1%, over the same 30 years, your account grows to roughly $574,000. The difference is $166,000. Gone. Not to bad performance, not to bad decisions, but purely to fees. Fees that came out in tiny fractions every single quarter, so small you'd never notice them, until you look at the final number and realize they cost you a significant chunk of what should have been yours. The funds with the lowest expense ratios are almost always index funds. Index funds don't try to beat the market, they just track it. And here's the thing that drives active fund managers absolutely crazy. Over long periods of time, most actively managed funds underperform index funds after fees. There are decades of research confirming this. So not only do you pay more for active management, you usually get worse results. Stick with low-cost index funds whenever they're available in your plan. Look for anything with an expense ratio below 0.20%, and strongly prefer below 0.10% if you can find it. Now let's talk about something that affects a huge number of Americans and yet gets handled badly more often than not. What do you do with your 401k when you change jobs? About 50 million Americans leave their jobs every year. And when you leave, you're going to be faced with a decision about what happens to the retirement money you've been building up with that employer. You have 4 options. Option 1. Leave it where it is. Your old employer's plan will continue to hold your money, and it'll keep growing. You won't be able to contribute to it anymore, but you're not forced to move it. This is what a lot of people do simply because it requires no action, and honestly, for a lot of situations, it's fine. The main downside is that if you switch jobs multiple times, you can end up with 401k accounts scattered across multiple old employers, which gets messy to track over time. Option 2. Roll it over into your new employer's 401k plan. If your new job also offers a 401k, you can usually transfer the old balance directly into the new plan. This keeps everything in one place and makes it easier to manage. The transfer, when done correctly, which means a direct rollover, not a check made out to you, is tax-free and penalty-free. Option 3. Roll it over into an individual retirement account, or IRA. This gives you the most flexibility because an IRA can hold a much wider variety of investments than most employer 401k plans, which are limited to whatever fund lineup the plan offers. If your old employer's plan had high fees or limited options, moving to an IRA can genuinely be an upgrade. Again, done as a direct rollover, there are no taxes or penalties. Option 4. Cash it out. Please don't do this. I want to be very direct with you here. If you're under 59 and a half and you cash out your 401k, you will immediately owe income taxes on the entire amount, whatever tax bracket you're in, plus a 10% early withdrawal penalty on top of that. So if you withdraw $30,000, you might end up keeping somewhere around $18,000 to $20,000 after the penalty and taxes, depending on your situation. And that money that you took out, it's no longer compounding. The $30,000 you pulled out at 35 could have been $170,000 at 65. You just chose $20,000 instead. That is one of the most expensive financial decisions a person can make, and it's done millions of times a year in America by people who are just trying to make it through a tough stretch. Now, of options 1 through 3, there isn't a dramatically correct universal answer. Personally, if I were switching jobs, I'd lean toward rolling over into the new employer's plan just for simplicity. Keep everything in one place, one statement, one login. But if the new plan has terrible fund options and high expense ratios, I'd seriously consider rolling into an IRA instead. The specific right choice depends on your situation. What's almost never the right choice, unless you're facing a genuine financial emergency with no other options, is to cash it out. All right, John here, and we're in the home stretch now. I want to spend the rest of this video on what I think is actually the most valuable part, the mistakes. Because understanding what to do is half the equation, but understanding what not to do is often where the real money is saved. The fee problem, and I will never stop talking about this. I already walked you through the math on expense ratios, but I want to come back to it because I think it bears repeating until it actually sticks. When you're looking at the fund options in your 401k, the expense ratio should be one of the first things you look at, not performance. Performance is backwards looking. Fees are guaranteed. You will pay that expense ratio every single year, regardless of whether the market is up or down. And over 30 years, paying 1% more annually in fees can cost you 6 figures. Go through your 401k fund list right now if you can. Find the index funds. Compare the expense ratios. Make the switch if you haven't already. It takes 15 minutes and it is one of the highest value financial moves you will ever make. Borrowing from your 401k, just don't. Your plan may allow you to take a loan against your 401k balance. And I understand the temptation, especially in a tight spot, because the interest rate on a 401k loan is typically much lower than a credit card or personal loan, and technically, you're paying the interest back to yourself. But the hidden cost of a 401k loan is that the money you borrowed is not in the market while it's in your pocket. It's not growing. And depending on the size of the loan and the market conditions during the repayment period, you can end up significantly worse off than if you'd found another way to handle the cash need. Beyond that, if you leave your job, voluntarily or not, while you have an outstanding 401k loan, the entire balance of that loan typically becomes due immediately. If you can't pay it back, it gets classified as an early withdrawal, and you're hit with taxes and the 10% penalty. It is a trap that looks like a lifeline, and I'd strongly encourage you to find another way before you go to your 401k for a loan. Early withdrawals, the most expensive emergency fund you never wanted. I already touched on this in the job change section, but it deserves its own emphasis here. Taking an early withdrawal from your 401k, meaning taking money out before age 59 and a half, is almost always a mistake. The 10% penalty is just the beginning. You also owe ordinary income tax on the full withdrawal amount. And the compounding loss, the money that was growing and now isn't, is a cost that doesn't show up on any tax form but is very real. If you're in a financial crisis and you feel like your 401k is your only option, please exhaust every other option first. Look at emergency credit lines, family resources, side income, asset sales. The 401k is the last resort, not the first. Not increasing your contributions when your income grows. This one is quiet. It doesn't feel like a mistake in the moment. You get a raise, life gets a little easier, maybe you upgrade your apartment or finally fix the car. And your 401k contribution stays at whatever percentage you set 3 years ago when you first enrolled. This is how people end up with retirement savings that are chronically behind their income. The rule I'd encourage you to adopt is simple. Every time you get a meaningful raise, increase your 401k contribution rate by at least half of the raise percentage. So if you get a 4% raise, bump your contribution rate up by 2%. You'll still take home more than you did before, and your retirement account starts catching up. Over a full career, this habit alone can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to your final balance. Hiring a financial advisor for something you don't need a financial advisor for. I want to be careful here, because I'm not saying financial advisors are universally useless. There are genuinely complex situations, estate planning, business ownership, major life transitions, where the right advisor is worth every penny. But for the basics of managing a 401k, contributing regularly, choosing low-cost diversified index funds, capturing the employer match, staying the course through market volatility, you do not need to pay someone 1% or 2% of your assets per year to do that for you. Let's look at what that actually costs. If your 401k balance is $500,000 and you're paying an advisor 1.5% of assets annually to manage it, that's $7,500 a year in fees. For what exactly? To tell you to stay diversified and not panic sell? You already know that. You learned it today for free. The real risk with paying an ongoing percentage-based fee for basic portfolio management isn't just the annual cost, it's the compounding cost over time. That $7,500 a year over 10 years, if it were instead kept in your account and growing at 7%, would be worth an enormous amount more than what you actually paid. Use low-cost index funds, set your allocations, increase contributions over time, and leave it alone. That is a strategy that has outperformed the vast majority of actively managed portfolios over any given 30-year period. No advisor required. Let me bring this back to where we started. Remember Robert, the guy who worked 31 years, had a great employer match, and missed it by 1 percentage point for his entire career. I want you to think about him not as a cautionary tale or a sad story, but as an opportunity. Because the reason Robert's situation is so common isn't stupidity or laziness. It's that nobody ever explained it to him in plain terms, the way I just did for you right now. Nobody sat down with him and said, here's exactly what your employer match means. Here's exactly what those expense ratios are costing you. Here's exactly why you can't afford to cash this out when things get hard. You have that information now. And information, when you actually use it, is the most valuable financial asset there is, because it doesn't depreciate, it doesn't charge a fee, and it doesn't fluctuate with the market. So here's what I want you to do today. Not next week, not when things settle down, today. Go log into your 401k account. Check that you're contributing at least enough to capture your full employer match. Look at your fund allocations and see what your expense ratios are. If they're high, find the index fund alternatives. And if you have old 401k accounts sitting with former employers, decide today what you're going to do with them. Those 4 things. That's it. If you do those 4 things today, you will be in better shape than the majority of Americans who have been contributing to their 401ks for years without ever doing this basic audit. My name is John. Thank you for spending the better part of an hour with me today. I mean that sincerely, because your time is the one thing you can never get back, and I hope this was worth every minute of it. If it was, share this with someone you actually care about. A sibling, a coworker, a friend in their 20s who thinks retirement is too far away to worry about. That share might be worth more to them than anything else you do for them this year. I'll see you in the next one.